live,
Yes,
right?
we are. Exactly. Precisely.
Thank you, ladies, for hanging in with us this extra 4 minutes. Computers are a very interesting invention. Whoever thought of that? Anyway, good morning, Dr. Rosensweet.
Good morning, Carolyn.
Andre, thank you so much always for all of your wonderful, kind help.
Yes, your patience, brother.
Oh my God. Yeah, huh? At least we have 3 patient people. Yay. That's a good thing. And a patient cat right behind me, as always. Guess what? Questions, questions, questions. I sent them to you, so I'm assuming or hoping that they're all okay, and let's get started. First question number 1 is from Mary. And Mary is asking why it is that low doses of hormones can be and often are problematic, which is going to lead me again into asking then, how would it be too that high doses can possibly be problematic? I know this is repetitive, but it's important because I get this question a lot.
And it's such a crucial question it is.
It is, huh?
Yeah, hormones are very powerful, and we happen to know what the right amount is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the right amount, you either have too little or too much.
Right.
And it is very common out there for some methods of treating women in menopause, because it's still the Wild West in treating women, to suggest and teach dosages that are too low. And at the other end of the spectrum, there are methods of teaching, and people hold these as gospel. I don't know why. I do know why. And where the dosage recommended in my way of viewing things and the way of many of my colleagues is it's too much.
Yes.
So one thing we know about hormones, and we learned it in the 1950s, that there was a miracle discovery called cortisol. Pharmaceutical manufacturers learned how to make it and make it commercially available, and doctors were prescribing it, and they were shoveling it out the door because people loved it. No big mystery why they loved it. Cortisol was an unusual hormone in that if you got a lot of it, you got high. So I arrived in medical school in, now hear this, 1964. And throughout medical school, I became concerned about and developed fear of only one single medicine, and it was cortisol, because
Really?
the medical world had been absolutely shocked. Again, cortisol was discovered. It had widespread popularity. Tremendous numbers of prescriptions were being written. People were loving it. And then after a couple years, people started showing up with symptoms of excessive cortisol. They got immune system suppression. It got fat redistribution. They started developing what's called a buffalo hump in their back, right there. A big fat pad developed. They started developing moon faces. Their skin
sort of like that prednisone thing.
Yes, it's the same thing that happens with an artificial cortisol called excessive doses of prednisone.
Right.
And a shockwave went through the medical world. And again, when I was being taught pharmacology in 1965, the pharmacologists were freaked out, and they just really wanted to hammer to us over and over again that don't treat with cortisol. It's very dangerous. Well, the issue with cortisol was not that people didn't need cortisol. The issue was they were being treated with too much. It's the classic example in my medical history of, number one, how powerful these hormones are. They're the most super powerful biochemicals that are floating around in our body. And number two, if you give too much, it's not a question of side effects. You're going to produce damage. Too much hormones, damage.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
And then we've learned in the world of menopause that too little hormones, we don't get what we want. For example, it takes a certain amount of estrogen in a woman to have vaginal health. And if that estrogen slips below a certain amount of production, she winds up with an unhealthy vagina.
Mm-hmm.
Starts needing to use lubricant on intercourse if she's having intercourse. Eventually she starts having pain on intercourse.
Right.
Eventually she irritates the opening to the bladder, the urethral meatus, and gets recurrent urinary tract infections. And coupled with that vaginal atrophy from not having enough, and also loss of the muscle that holds up the bladder and the uterus, she winds up in adult diapers called Depends.
Yeah.
Women tolerate this and they don't like it. And so I'm giving you a classic example if women don't have enough estrogen.
Correct.
Another classic example of not having enough estrogen. Women lose bone.
Yes.
Osteopenia and osteoporosis, and if they fall, they fracture. Not enough estrogen. There's other things that go into bone, but estrogen's the big one. So
right.
The moral of the story in the world of hormone treatment is don't give too little and don't give too much. And the problem is that there's a very, very small percentage of physicians and prescribers that know what too little and too much is.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. Now, they could know, and that's not true of the physicians and nurse practitioners that are in our system that are received our training. They know exactly what too little is too much is. And where do we learn where too little is too much? In the medical literature. This is clearly defined by very exquisite, simple medical studies. The study went out, for example, to see how much estrogen do you really need to protect the bones in the vagina. And they gave various level of dosages to large numbers of women. And what they learned is the lower dosages didn't work. There wasn't enough estrogen there to protect the vagina and the bones. These are very easy parameters to measure and to assess. So when they came out with the final report of the medical study, they said, don't use too little. You won't protect the bones in the vagina. Use this amount, use this much, use at least this much. In fact, the patches and the gels that are produced by pharmaceutical manufacturers are conforming to the studies that they originally did to determine what's too little.
Right.
Now let's talk about what's too much. Estrogen stimulates breast glandular tissue. Once a month, every single woman in her cycle gets a burst of estrogen, the right amount, that does a lot of things in a menstrual cycle. And one of the wildest things that it does is it starts preparation for the possibility of breastfeeding right there, every single menstrual cycle. Oh my God. In anticipation of possibly getting pregnant, the process of preparing for possible breastfeeding begins every single cycle. If the woman does not impregnate, then the whole process of preparing for breastfeeding disappears.
Correct.
It evaporates, it collapses.
Right.
This is a very technically beautiful orchestration that's actually astounding. If you don't believe in the divine or creator, study the female menstrual cycle.
Astounding is such a great word too. Yeah.
Now here's how you prepare for breastfeeding. You produce additional breast glandular cells every single month of your young woman life. Additional cells. Women often feel this. They often feel as the cycle is progressing beyond the actual bleeding phase that their breasts are getting fuller. Yeah, they're getting fuller partially because they're adding breast glandular cells. In order to do that, there's something called cell division and mitosis. That's how you use extra cells. And
apoptosis?
we're not there yet.
Okay.
And if it turns out that a woman does not get pregnant, then the body signals, we don't need those extra breast glandular cells. Let's dissolve them. Let's make them disappear. And that's that curious, interesting, fun word called apoptosis. These cells evaporate, they collapse, they disappear once a month if a woman does not get pregnant. If a woman gets pregnant, these extra cells become more extra cells. Breasts get very large in preparation for breastfeeding throughout a pregnancy. So this is how we define too much. We believe, or I'm certainly one of the physicians that believe, that an older woman in her late 40s and 50s should not be producing extra cells in her breast. We believe that this process of cell division and mitosis, which is a delicate and vulnerable process, you can have a normal mitosis and produce a normal breast glandular cell, or you can have an abnormal mitosis, cell division, and produce an abnormal, genetically different cell. And if there's enough difference there, it loses control, the body loses control of it, and that's what breast cancer is. So I'm a firm believer in don't produce mitoses in women in their late 40s where the immune systems aren't as strong usually and aren't as easily carefully able to detect some kind of cellular abnormality, because we're producing cancer cells when we're very young, but a very clear and a very attentive and robust and rigorous immune system identifies those abnormal cells and wipes them out.
Right.
But as we grow older, the vigor of the immune system, like many other vigors, can change. So I know that this is an extensive answer, but the question is so profound, Carolyn.
It is. I know it is.
Take the time with this one.
Yes.
And so what do? We clearly define what's too much hormone in a menopausal woman. What's too little? Too little, we at least want to protect the bones in the vagina. In fact, if we do protect the bones in the vagina, we're going to do a tremendous amount of good. That doesn't mean that some women might need some more additional estrogen. Some women do, but at least we want to protect the bones in the vagina. And a woman who's not having pain on intercourse anymore, for example, and has a decently healthy vagina, she's protecting her bones. So that defines that lower limit. Well, we know the numbers. So on the 24-hour urine hormone test, we define those numbers. We define it by listing, this is the number that you need to get that much, or you're not going to protect the bones in the vagina, not to mention the arteries, the brain, the skin, everything else that needs it.
Right.
We don't want to do too much because we don't, and we know what that number is. I could tell you what that number is. It's between 8 and 14 micrograms of the sum of estradiol and estrone showing up in a 24-hour urine collection. That's the green zone. That's the optimal zone. We don't want to go below 8. That woman is at risk for vaginal atrophy and bone loss, not to mention cognitive decline, that she loses arterial protection, brain. And we don't want to do too much. We don't want to go above 14 because that puts a woman at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation. We don't want that. Now, there are rare exceptions where a woman needs extra estrogen. Bravo. We identify those exceptions and we take care of it. We give her the extra estrogen. And we take we do the breast monitoring procedures that are really called for if you're going to push the numbers up higher. So here's the deal. Unfortunately, we're at a very early stage of the general physician and nurse practitioner public understanding menopause. And they're out there winging it. And there's actual training programs that they can attend, weekend seminars, week seminars, all kinds of stuff. And they're not good. but they act like they're recommending testing methods, they're recommending dosage methods that do not conform to what would be an excellent standard of care. Well, we've got a big team, you know that, Carolyn.
I do.
And one of the missions of our big team is to bring in standard of care. I'm sitting very much in a catbird seat around working with the whole process of standardizing and producing the proper way to treat women in menopause. It doesn't, in the world of knee surgery, there are procedures that are recognized throughout the orthopedic surgeon community. You don't see blogs and Facebook pages where thousands of women and men are confused about knee surgery and asking for help. You don't see that. You don't see it in neurology. Thousands of people going online to see if they can figure out. But in the world of menopause, you do, because we're at an early phase, and menopause was injured. Menopause was injured enormously.
It was kind of injured even before it was injured. Worse.
I don't think so. I think there was a body blow that took place. Well, in the course of my career, I witnessed all of us generalists being encouraged to zero in and focus on and get excellent at one specialty. And thus, these specialties of gastroenterology and cardiology emerged and got defined and got board certified and got rigorous training programs, 3-year residencies, mentorship. It was amazing. Menopause, it didn't happen. At the same time these other specialties were happening, out comes the Women's Health Initiative, scares everybody, scares women and scares the medical community. And while other specialties were developing and defining standards of care and getting board certification, menopause remained the Wild West. And there was very few specialists. There's very few specialists in menopause this very day. So anyway, I'm sorry to wander off into the periphery, but this is why things are being taught out there, because we're at such an early stage.
We are, but may I ask you this? Don't you feel, because I seem to feel it, that a paradigm shift is happening? It is, and it's moving into that direction of menopause being seen as the specialty that it is supposed to be.
So. I'm not. We're definitely at the tip of the spear of this process, but we're in very early stages.
That is true.
There's widespread lack of. There's people not specializing in it.
I know.
And we're changing that. We're creating specialists. Our whole team is all about training and mentoring in something akin to a residency program. People to specialize this, and if they've got broad-based practices, to let go and get good. Don't just have menopause be one small part of what you're doing in your broad-based practice.
No, it can't be that.
Take the risk, like I did 25 years ago, and get great at one thing, because you're playing with hormones, and hormones are super powerful. And back to the original question, thank goodness. Too much or too little is definitely known. The only way you're going to know about it is if you get into 24-hour urine hormone testing. Now hear this, you'll never know. And too much and too little matters. You got to know what it is if you're treating women. You got to know how to test for it. You got to know what your numbers are. Most doctors know that if they give someone 5 milligrams of Xanax, they're going to put them to sleep for 3 weeks. Rip Van Winkle. Mm-hmm. But if they give them a 1/4 milligram or a 1/2 milligram of Xanax, they know their dosages with Xanax.
Right.
But there's a widespread that people don't understand how much estrogen they're really giving. They don't understand how much it takes to protect the vagina or the bladder. They don't understand when they go over the top and put a woman at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation. And the earth is, I do want to return to what you're suggesting. The earth is getting better also. The menopause world is getting better also. And who knows, the 100th monkey moment may come. turning point may come where all of a sudden things start getting really good. Well, we got a lot of great people.
And I'm on that side of good for sure, because there's no way, being so involved with this that anybody would, I would think, ever want to be on the side of bad. That
I want
doesn't
to
make
give you I want to give you a perfect example of what the Wild West is.
Okay.
You've been running the ins and outs of menopause for quite a while. I joined a couple months ago. It's very hard to control that website because people can say whatever they want. They can make whatever comments they were. And just the other day, we picked up a comment that someone sounded like they knew what they were saying, but they were giving information that were putting women at risk for too much estrogen. But, who understands the numbers? That person obviously didn't understand the numbers or the outcome. We had to delete this person. We have to police in and outs of menopause because people can just say whatever they want. So,
thankfully I've been very, very fortunate to, anyway, there were no groups back in the day. And then all of a sudden there was just I don't know what the other word is beyond plethora, plethora times 2, plethora squared. Just so many groups that did come up. And in a big way, this was extremely helpful because women were talking about menopause, whereas we hadn't been talking about it. And then, as you say, follow the bouncing ball, or this way, or whichever way it goes. We got lucky enough, thank you, to have, where'd you go? Hello? There you are. We got lucky enough to have you, Dr. Rosensweet, and you're helping us to clarify so many of these questions that are so very, very important. When you, my teacher says, the devil in the detail, devil in the detail is a big deal. And you'll often say, I think it's statistically insignificant. I think that's it, which means it's moot. It's not, right? I mean, those are two really big.
Let's not go there. Why don't we go to the next question, because we're just going wild here.
Because it's the Wild West. That's why. Okay, question 2. And it's back to our progesterone. Many women state that when they take progesterone, it in itself, gives them really bad anxiety. And this woman is saying, I thought that anxiety in the main was caused by either very low or very high estrogen. Is anxiety a likely sign that one might have a paradoxical effect from progesterone?
Another excellent question. It just boggles me how many good questions come through.
Yeah.
There's a certain number of women, it's not a huge percentage, that have challenges with progesterone treatment.
Yes.
In my experience, the vast majority of women do beautifully with progesterone, and progesterone is the great calmer.
Yeah.
And, it's a very unusual hormone. Most hormones are fight or flight animating.
Right.
Like adrenaline, cortisol, estrogen, testosterone. You take those hormones, they're animating. They'd get us going. Progesterone is a great calmer. In fact, if we inject the proper dose of progesterone intravenous to anybody, including you and I, if we get the dose right, we can be put to sleep so deep that surgery could be performed on us.
That blows my mind whenever you say it. Yeah.
Progesterone is the great calmer for almost every woman. However, there are exceptions. There's women who have a tremendous challenge tolerating any dose of progesterone. And there's this concept in medicine that's a very basic concept. It's called the therapeutic window. It's the right amount of taking anything. You could think about if you take too little of something, you don't get the effect. If you take too much of something, you don't get the proper effect. You got to nail it. You got to nail your dosage to land within the therapeutic window. It's a basic core concept in pharmacology.
Right.
And if you go outside the therapeutic window, you can get weird effects. Like you can get too much progesterone. You're calling it a paradoxical effect, or the questioner is calling it a paradoxical effect. And that's a concept worth examining. There's some women or men, I mean, this occurs across the face of medicine, that you give them the medicine and you expect the effect and you get the opposite effect.
Right.
Most people, you give them Xanax, they're going to get quiet and groggy. They're going to get sedated. The higher dose you get. There's a few people that will have a paradoxical effect, and instead of getting sedated with Xanax and calm, they're going to get agitated. And this can occur with anything. But the very first thing when I hear that a woman is having trouble with progesterone, the very first thing I think of these days, which even relates back to our first question there, is she on the right dose? And was the process of getting her progesterone dosage, was there a proper, rational, common sense process to use to determine the progesterone dose? Or was she just slammed with the certain dose as if it was going to work?
Right.
For example, if a woman's body has not seen progesterone for quite a while, which is so common, your progesterone can decline faster and deeper long before your periods cease than your estrogen does. Progesterone can decline in a lot of women. When progesterone or any hormone declines, the receptor sites decline. They go dormant. So when we think of the world of hormones, we think of hormones, but it's really a dance between the hormone and the receptor site. They get together. When that hormone disappears, the receptor sites go to sleep. And if you're going to reintroduce hormones to receptor sites that are basically dormant, you better be careful, because what could seem like a normal amount to an alive and active receptor site population could seem like a tsunami to when there's only a few of these receptor sites squeaking alive there.
Yes, exactly.
So when a woman says she has trouble with progesterone, I start with the basics. And I ask myself the question, do we have to go lower and slower with her? And we always do. That's the very first thing we do. We start with much, much lower dosages and gradually increase them so that we're simultaneously gently awakening the sleeping beauty receptor sites. They're, oh, my prince is arrived. Progesterone is here, but I'm still a little sleepy. So I can't receive his kiss quite yet. I'm going to take a year or two to wake up.
So much for rapid relief. Oh my God. Well, you know what? Again, it's explained really well. And sleeping receptor sites, escort cells, so on and so forth. You talk about the divine, and honestly, I don't know, that team person, whoever thought of putting us together, did so in such amazing perfection.
Now, I would like to add other things. Those are not the only reasons that women can have trouble with progesterone or anything you name. You can have trouble with vitamin C.
Right.
There are other reasons. There are more esoteric reasons. There's actual processes in which we determine when we think we've identified a problematic hormone and a paradoxical response, for example. There's methods we can use to check it out and to consider other possibilities, but I'm not going to go into depth there. Really, your body used to love progesterone. If you're a woman, love it. There was 100 times more progesterone milligram for milligram in young women than there is estrogen. something your body loves progesterone. It's just finding our way back home to that. And you know
Yes.
what? The world does not end if a certain hormone replenishing doesn't work. It doesn't end there. It's like, okay, so it doesn't work. There's so many zillions of other moving parts in a human being that we just let go. And we take care of the 32 jillion other things that amount to health. And
Yeah.
you think there's rules. You think everything works like clockwork perfectly,
Right.
like
Going
a
back to
Tesla, right? Yeah, well, not so with the human being. And there's things that don't follow the rules. Like, for example, there's a patient that I have. She's in her late 60s. She hasn't had estrogen. She never got hormonal treatment. And she's got terrific libido, terrific energy, and tremendous libido, and a healthy vagina. Go figure. We've
Oh,
tested
just
her.
that's it.
Her estrogen levels are super low.
Oh,
I mean, super low. They're near the basement. So you think there's rules in medicine where you can make a rule and everything's going to conform to it. And really, I'm referring to progesterone here. You think there's a rule called everyone needs progesterone. Well, there isn't a rule, not in the human body. And there's 82 billion other compensations that can make. And that's why I use the example of the woman who had no hormones for 20 years, tremendous libido, a lot of sexual activity, but healthy vagina, no rules. Now, there are commonalities, and I don't want to go overboard here because there's a lot of stuff that's predictive. But when a woman can't tolerate progesterone after going through a rigorous, let's figure out progesterone process, and she winds up not tolerating it, there's 82 jillion other things that matter, and you let go.
and it's okay.
It's okay. It's fine. Who knows? We're talking about the biology of the human body. There are
Correct.
other energies and emotions and consciousness and all kinds of mysterious things that are related to health that are far more influential and originative. So you don't want to lock in that I can't tolerate progesterone. There must be something wrong with me. No, there's far bigger forces at work. This is life. This is
Yes.
huge. You don't want to have to get locked into, well, my biochemistry isn't exact, therefore there must be something wrong. Oh no, there's much bigger fish to fry. As I
Right.
explored the subjects of happiness and love and peace and heart and soul knows there's some big moving parts there. But there I go again. I'm going to.
And it's totally okay because it's an interview that I want to do with you one day, and it's getting into a lot of that. You do know I'm in school, and so I'm studying a lot of the stuff that I wasn't taught, and it has to do with much of what you're talking about, and it's fascinating. And we will do that interview one of these days. We will get there. I'm going to move on. Thank you for that answer because it answers another question that I was going to ask, but now I don't really have to ask it. But this question is something that I'm interested in, and I'm hoping that you can answer it. Well, I'm sure you can. I don't know if it's appropriate or not. Could you please explain to me why I, or a woman, would be having a high DHEAS reading? I'm not taking DHEA. I'm also wondering what it is that I might be able to do to lower it. It's a big why question.
There's a lot of missing parts to that question, and that's what puts some limitations on my ability to respond to some of these questions.
Got it.
However, I have encountered high DHEA.
I mean,
Now,
just on its own?
Pardon?
Just on its own? Kind of?
No, I have encountered human beings that have an elevated DHEAS. And what DHEAS is, and that's what you said, it was a DHEA-S, right?
Yes.
Well, what this tells me is this was a blood test. And that's good. That's a good way to assess DHEA. In fact, it's the proper way to assess DHEA when you're doing blood. There's next steps to take, and this is what you really want to hear. You now need to take the next level of assessing what's going on here. And where that begins is with the 24-hour urine hormone test.
Right.
Because you're talking about DHEAS, the serum transport form.
Is that what the S stands for?
Pardon me?
When you have DHEA-S, is S serum?
No, S is sulfate. It's how DHEA is transported around in the blood.
Thank you.
DHEA is a steroid hormone. These things are fat soluble. They don't travel around in water. You ever add olive oil to water? Does it dissolve in the water? No, it does not dissolve in the water. And well, in the blood, it doesn't dissolve in the blood either. So in order to transport a fat-soluble anything around in the blood, and that includes the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin D, they have to be transported. They have to be linked up to something. And what the body does is it links DHEA up to a sulfate molecule, and that's how it's transported in the blood.
Yes.
So in any time it's transported, there's a very, very tiny amount that's free DHEA. So the next step would be repeat that serum test and include a DHEAS and a DHEA. And simultaneously on the same day, do a 24-hour urine collection, because we now want to see the whole family of DHEA. DHEA is not the only member. It's DHEA and its metabolites and its testosterone. And it's only when I get to take a look at the whole family of the androgens that I get an idea, oh, I see what's going on. This is not being metabolized properly, so the DHEA is building up, or whatever the case is. But there's steps to take that are quite technical to figure this one out. So you look at the simultaneous DHEAS and free DHEA on a blood test at the same day that you do a 24-hour urine hormone test, and now you get a bigger picture. And the last case that I investigated on this was a young man of Italian origin, and the only thing that he had going on was a genetic propensity to produce high DHEA. And we sent him to a medical center in Atlanta called Emory University and had an endocrinologist evaluate this as well. Because in the back of your mind, you wonder, why is that DHEA being excessively produced? Well, maybe it's the stress response. And maybe the real tool you have is to get better tools to deal with the stress in your life, so you're not activating the fight or flight chemistry.
Right.
Or at the other end of the spectrum, there's a possibility of a hormone-producing tumor. These things do exist. And the 24-hour urine hormone test is going to be a real helpful clue, because this DHEA is coming primarily out of the adrenal gland and the ovary. And if you see super high levels, then we take the next step. We go looking for one of those tumors. And I have detected a hormone-producing tumor by picking up a high cortisol level. We did it was a CAT scan or an MRI, and we saw a tumor in the adrenal gland, and we caught it by that testing at a very early stage. The anesthesiologist commented to the patient that they had never seen one of these tumors picked up at such an early stage, and thus easy to manage, and it wasn't even a cancer.
Very lucky.
Yeah, because we did the proper testing early on.
Right.
So it makes everything easier. So before you jump to a conclusion that you got a DHEA producing tumor, you take the steps. So you go to someone who knows how to do the 24-hour urine hormone test and simultaneous blood test, and you take a look at that, and then you'll get the clue as to whether or not the next level of testing should be done, an MRI or CAT scan of the adrenals and the ovaries. because that's, if there's going to be a hormone secreting tumor, that's where the most likely location is. It can occur in other areas. So you follow the bouncing ball, and because you got an elevated DHEAS, what we found in this young man was he didn't have a tumor.
Right.
There's a certain genetic strain where he happened to produce the extra androgens, and it showed up as the DHEA, and it took, we wanted to get an authoritative report from an Emory University, because he was near Atlanta, specialist in endocrinology. And sometimes these hormone issues, you go to the endocrinologist. One thing that they tend to be tremendously trained in are these unusual circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So they know how to find this stuff out, and they've got the tools to find it out. So you might jump right to the endocrinologist, although we've done it other ways by doing a 24-hour urine hormone test and a simultaneous DHEAS and DHEA.
Got it. Thank you. That's an excellent answer. I, certainly would not have known how to answer that myself. In having high DHEA in the body, is this something that a woman, is it associated with fight or flight? Meaning, is it something you would feel on your own that would propel you then, as we talk about, to go and get further testing?
Not necessarily. It's a good question. If a woman's cranking up too much estrogen or too much progesterone or too much testosterone or too much thyroid, she's going to get obvious symptoms. DHEA is more subtle, and DHEA tends to convert to either estrogen or testosterone, so you don't rely upon symptoms of excess to identify too much DHEA. But here's what usually happens with DHEA. Number one, it is the most prevalent steroid hormone in the body. More milligrams of DHEA than there is anything else. And people haven't figured out, is it an actual hormone or is it a precursor to a hormone?
Right.
And when you look at the biochemistry of how these steroids arise from cholesterol and convert one to another, it's rather remarkable when you see the elegance there and the technical issues there. But one thing is that happens to all women and all men is when we're young, we have robust levels of DHEA, more milligrams of DHEA than we have of testosterone or estrogen or progesterone. So it's doing something in there. And then start high, gradually decline as we grow older. So you have a woman who's 50 years old, you're going to see about a quarter or less of the amount of DHEA that you see in a 20-year-old. Is that cool? I don't think so. These hormones, they're very crucial. We want to replenish everything. And in a menopausal woman's treatment plan, you want to get the DHEA right as well. And if you're doing 24-hour urine hormone testing, not other urine testing, not the 5-spotter, 4-spot, beyond filter paper urine testing, no. Not salivary testing. I'm a highly opinionated guy, as you know, and and in women you're treating, the serum testing is not going to be the method of choice to evaluate your DHEA levels, because it depends on when you took your last DHEA. That doesn't happen in 24-hour urine hormone testing. You get the whole picture no matter when you take your DHEA in the cycle. You want to get proper tested.
Yes.
And what's the strategy? Well, I can tell you, having tested thousands of women, that there ain't a 50-year-old woman who's got the amount of DHEA she had when she was 20.
Yeah.
And what's the strategy? Get it decent. Get it in a reasonable zone for your whole life. So there isn't one single menopausal patient that I treat that isn't taking DHEA. Here's another thing about women and DHEA. I know we're drifting into a DHEA story here. If you're a woman, do not take over 15 milligrams of DHEA a day orally.
1.5?
Pardon?
1.5. 15 milligrams.
It's so easy to get 25 milligram and 50 milligram DHEA right off the shelves in any pharmacy. Don't do it.
I bought 50 milligrams.
Don't go above 15.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we want you to get accurately tested. Even 15 is going to be too much for some women.
Mm-hmm.
The women in our practice, we zero in ultimately on something between 7.5 and 15 milligrams when we are treating with oral. But these days, more and more, we're going towards topical DHEA in our lovely little bottles.
Yes.
We're mixing it with the testosterone, make it less expensive. So get the DHEA right, just like you want to get the bias right. You want to get the testosterone right. You want to get the progesterone right.
It's fascinating. And I'm actually glad that we drifted into the DHEA world because it's not something that we just like openly, overtly start conversations off with, like, hey, how's your DHEA? I mean, it's not really something we talk about.
Like when I say good morning to someone, I usually say something like, good morning, Carolyn. How's your DHEA?
And I'm like, funny you asked. Couldn't stop thinking about it all night.
I was dreaming about it. Let me just do one basic. Let me say one basic thing about hormones.
Okay.
The ovary produces 4 major hormones. 4. Estrogens, progesterone, testosterone, and lo and behold, DHEA. The adrenal gland produces more than 4 major hormones. DHEA is one of them. Since it's there, we want to honor and respect it. So, yeah, as you go out into your world today, start asking your friends, well, how's your DHEA?
Well, I always run it through my boss because I like to teach him. So he's like, what is that? Yes, I will ask my friends about DHEA today. And I'll get back with you on that. You always say it. There are a lot of moving parts, and there are. And in discussing like the group and having to take someone away, which is never pleasant, but it's imperative, I believe, or I feel, to get that right information out because
and not damaging information. So beware as women, as you're cruising around Facebook, truth be told, I did not go into Facebook until 2 months ago in my life.
That's right.
And when I started going into Facebook because my team was wanting me to do this, I'm astounded by the amount of comments that show up in menopausal sites, for example, that the people sound very authoritative. They sound like, oh, this is the way it is, that it's damaging, dangerous information. We had to remove someone from the site because, in my opinion, this person was saying information that could put a woman's breast glandular cells at excessive stimulation, overstimulation, mitosis.
Yes.
Dosage. And it looked like the comment was just knowledgeable. Be sure you give between 5 and 10 milligrams of estradiol was the comment. Yeah, that is really high doses of estradiol. And that's going to produce youthful levels in a young woman. And that puts her, and a menopausal woman, and that puts her at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation in her 50s.
Yeah.
We remove this chap. So beware. I don't know how to help you sort it out. Here's what it all comes down to. This is the rocket surgery answer for a woman in menopause.
Rocket surgery.
Sooner or later, you're going to discover that your main job, the main thing that you need to know about menopause, is find yourself someone who's specializing in it and really knows what they're doing and what they're talking about. And one way you can tell is, are they doing 24-hour urine hormone tests or not? If they're not, they're just not going to have enough information. And are they prescribing compounded bioidentical hormones? If they're not, they're going to be dealing with a lesser tool bag that's not going to get you the kind of individuation and care that you need. Go shopping until you find someone who's specializing in menopause and at least has those two criteria going for them. Otherwise, you're in the Wild West. People are promoting celebrating hormones. I know that this is really going out on a limb because I'm taking a stand here. I'm openly criticizing people who are probably very good human beings and believe in what they're doing and have cared about it. Some of them have cared about it as long as I've been doing menopause. People who advocate celebrating hormones and this urine 5-point that I'm not mentioning the commercial name that's really got a lot of problems with it.
Yes.
If they're doing this, sorry, you've got someone with a very strong opinion here that you're not going to get what you need there. So there we go.
Yeah,
it's the same thing over and over again. You're in a technical world, you can figure it out, but it's like me and like when I had an interest in automobiles when I was young. And I got fascinated. And by the time I was in my 20s, I wanted to rebuild my Corvair van engine. And I did. And I rebuilt my Corvair van. It was fascinating. I loved it. Getting in there and didn't have to use my mind so much as I do in medicine. Rebuilt the engine. And God, the thing ran for a grand total of 7,000 miles, at which point it froze.
Oh.
I had to donate my Corvair van to a preschool,
a medical school, a
preschool in Santa Fe. They used it as a children's playground thing.
Aww.
And what did I learn? When I got my Volkswagen van and that engine needed major overhaul, I took it to someone who had done hundreds of them. He was an auto mechanic.
Right.
And back in the day, because I was still fascinated, he let me sit in and watch him rebuild that engine. And it was astounding to me. He did the same things, but every step along the way, he had a tool to determine this, and he knew how much to tighten this, and he measured this. And I went, oh my God, this is why when I rebuilt the engine, it froze, because this person is his career. He's done his 10,000 hours. He's gotten expert at it. And this is what I left out, what you don't know, you know? So it's the same thing anywhere. If you want something is done as important as restoration of hormones, you want someone who's really devoting and focusing in on and hunkering down on and getting great at this. You want to start.
It is, and it's so true. And I will start to close out. I'll never forget, that I found you on YouTube. You were talking about just that. You were talking about elder care for one, and you were talking about having rebuilt this car engine, and you were talking about that. And I was like, I gotta find that guy. He knows what he's talking about, and I did. And you weren't talking a lot about menopause per se in that one interview, but I know you remember that interview and the guy that interviewed you. And it was a really interesting, I guess we call it like an analogy that you made in regards to go to someone expert, It's
like anything, you know, when you start learning things, you think you know things. And you know what you don't know.
Right.
And yet you tell anything in the world that any subject in the world, a musician, a janitor, an auto mechanic, a painter, the professionals are the ones who've taken this on as this is their thing. And they put in, as Malcolm Gladwell put it, they're 10,000 hours, and man, you learn a lot in 10,000 hours. And in the world of medicine, you want a really excellent training program. And then you need to be mentored. I mean, these surgeons that you can go to, they've gone through 4 years of medical school, a year minimal of internship. a 3-year minimal residency in which they're supervised by doctors that are old and experienced, and they put in 10 million hours.
Exactly.
And those are the knee
Exactly.
surgeons you want to go to. You don't want to go to someone who thinks I'm a general practitioner and I like knees. I think, you want to go to the people who know what they're doing. It's like this in any single field in the world. Chefs, I'm a good cook. I'm a healthy cook, but oh my God, do I lack the chef's gift. The gift that they have. They got a gift. And if you taste my food, it's going to be healthy. But it won't have that magic that someone who's devoting their life to it as their profession. And it's a universe of difference. Well, menopause and hormones is like that. So this is the news that can be upsetting, is that the main thing for a menopausal woman is you can learn things and it's helpful. And you can learn it. Get our book, download our book.
Absolutely.
We give you a roadmap there for one way of addressing menopause that is a high level of expertise. That's what you're seeking. You're seeking, but you can't do it yourself. You can't write a prescription. You can't get this stuff over the counter, nor should you ever be able to. The stuff is way too powerful.
I agree.
So your main job, and I'm taking us back to this, is if you're in perimenopause or menopause, you ultimately want to go shopping until you land with a medical care professional, a healthcare professional that you go, wow, this person really knows their stuff. And in the world of menopause, I'm taking you right to the mat. They need to be doing the 24-hour urine hormone tests, or they're not going to be knowing what's going on there. And they need to not be doing this other stuff, not be doing salivary testing or blood testing or urine 5-point testing where you pee on filter paper.
I know.
People don't know what they don't know, so they could be thinking that, and they can sound very erudite, as this commenter on the ins and outs of menopause sounded very erudite. I was looking at that. I said, look at that. It sounds like this person knows what they're doing, but they don't, and they're putting women's lives at risk. That really bothered me. Of course,
I know it did.
That person was deleted from the ins and outs of menopause. I know I have a very core fault of going on and on and on. I apologize, people.
No, it's fine. And you know what?
You're a human being as well. You got a human being talking to you here with all my.
You long ago said to me, it takes one to know one. We just yak away. And so much so that I so apologize. I didn't even go onto the chat and look at the questions from the women. And
we run out of time because I have to move on. Yes.
So we have a whole weekend for women to please send those questions to me. I will get to them, and I apologize for that. I really do. But I think the interview had a lot of really good, as I am learning, pearls in it, good devil in the details in it. And as always, Dr. Rosensweet, I think that you have amazing things to say. And I think, strongly opinionated or not, you've earned the right to be able to have those strong opinions. You've done the work.
We'll have someone challenge me if they don't think I'm right.
Exactly. And I don't think I really want to do that.
Stuff all the time. I learn new stuff all the time. Just challenge me. If you think that I've made a statement that you think is not correct, professional or layperson, challenge me. It'll be fun.
I'll think about that.
Carolyn, I'm gonna move on, and as always, it's I have so much fun doing this with you.
It's always fun.
The questions are spectacular. I say that the questions that you show up with from ins and outs of menopause, these are spectacular questions. They're just so right on.
Thank you.
It's a real. That's one of the reasons I'm excited to do this every Tuesday and Thursday morning, because these questions can't get better.
No, these women, they're amazing. And then I go ahead and I am try to be very, very fair, and I get the ones out there that, seem really important for this moment to ask, and we get to the other ones later. And for me, I don't mind repetition at all. It breeds retention, and yeah, it just works. So,
all right, so I'm going to move on, and as always, great to see you.
Wherever you moved on to, yeah, there you are. Have a great weekend. Enjoy, as always, and to the women, you enjoy as well. Be safe, be happy, and like what Chris Como, I guess, always says, like, let's get at it, whatever he says. We'll do that on Tuesday when we do our next Q&A.
All righty. Yeah? Bye, everybody. Bye,
Hasta
Carolyn.
la vista. See you later.